Right. Thank you. Yeah. We basically start discussing about the capital, right? What I told you, was we have three risk. We have three things, which is exceptional loss, right? We have exceptional loss, expected loss, and unexpected loss. These are the three losses we will face, right? So since this is exceptional, like tsunami, we don't know whether it will happen or not, and if it happens, what kind of disaster we will face, we don't know. Therefore, we are not bothered about this thing, right? We are not bothered about exceptional losses. If it happens, we will look at it. Then expected loss, which we expect annually, right? As we project our revenue, we project NPL and we project provision, right? So we have calculated this and taken care of it through provisioning. When you have high provisioning, we pass it to the customer through interest rates, right? When your NPL is high, what happens? Your cost will go up because of provisioning. Then you start lending at a higher rate. So this is also not worried about because we have taken care of it through provisioning. The problem lies here, right? We expect something, but we have a much more higher loss, which is unexpected. So now when you have an unexpected loss, this is your funding. CASA, TMD, term loans, money market, and capital. This is your owner's fund. All others, you can't go back and say, I made a loss, so I can't pay you back. So this is capital, which is the requirement. So for unexpected loss, we tackle through capital. Right? We tackle through capital. We need capital mainly for unexpected losses. We need to protect our depositors and shareholders, depositors and investors. Therefore, we need capital. Then we talked about something called minimum capital adequacy ratio, which we are going to learn again, which is capital divided by risk-weighted asset, right? Capital divided by risk-weighted asset. That is the minimum capital we need to have. That is because I spoke to you about Basel. We started talking about Basel after 1974, Asset Bank collapsed. So what happened? All the banks started fighting for deals in the international market. So what is Basel, BIBS, Bank for International Settlement? They wanted to find out a way how to allow banks to fight for their size, basically. If you are small, you need to play small. If you are big, you can play big. So it is a level playing field for everyone. Otherwise, what happens? Smaller banks try to do bigger deals. If collapse, this bank will wipe out. Then all these people will get affected. Therefore, Basel introduced Basel BCBS, Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. They introduced the concept called capital adequacy, right? You need to have your money if you want to lend. That means if you want to lend 100 rupees, you need to have 10 rupees of your money. Balance you can borrow and lend. That is how this minimum capital adequacy ratio came into play, right? If you have a question, please stop me because this is new to you. So unexpected this one. Then we went to discuss these three types of capital. Economic capital, which is the capital needed to operate the business. Regulatory capital, which is the capital your regulator. Your regulator wants you to have. Then bank capital, which is the actual capital we have, right? There are three types of capital. First one is tier 1 capital or co-capital. Second one, tier 2 capital or supplementary capital, and tier 3 capital. Tier 1 capital deals with the share common shares, paid up common shares, uncumulative preferential shares, and P&L reserve. That is the core capital basically. Then you have other things: loan loss provision, undisclosed reserves, subordinated term debt. That means 5-year term loans, subordinated. That means if something goes wrong, we can go to the lender and say, I'm not in a position to pay you. Right? That kind of a thing. All other things settle. If we left with something, I will pay. Right? But normally all loans are not subordinated. Right? Hybrid instruments like debentures, those comes under tier 2 capital. Then tier 3 capital, again, subordinated short-term debt with 2-year maturity. Supplementary capital, it is 5-year maturity. Tier 3 capital, it is subordinated debt with 2-year maturity. Then from the capital, we have to deduct few things. That is goodwill, investment in unconsolidated banking and finance subsidiaries, and investment in the capital of banks and financial institutions. So when you say capital, it is tier 1 capital, tier 2 capital, tier 3 capital, minus goodwill, minus investment in unconsolidated banking and finance subsidiary companies, and investment in banks and finance. Right? This is what I told you. Basel introduced the capital requirement in order banks from different countries competing from the same loan would have to set aside roughly the same amount of capital on the loan, right? That is minimum capital adequacy. The reason was to create level playing field for the internationally active banks. So it started with 1988. Basel 1, Basel 2 came in 2004. Basel 1, the purpose to prevent international banks from building business volume without adequate capital backing. The focus, and like we'll start with Basel 1. Basel 1 started in 1988. Though Halsad Bank collapsed in 1974, they had to work so hard to bring in this risk capital thinking. So only in 1988 they started Basel 1. When it came to Basel 1, BCBS thought the main risk in banking sector is credit risk. So Basel 1 take care of only credit risk. There is one and only risk is credit risk. So based on that credit risk requirement, they thought about this minimum capital adequacy. So different banks who are trying to give the same loan will have to allocate an amount of capital. So if I am big, whatever the amount I have, I can allocate. If you are small, if you are trying for bigger loan, you need to have capital in order to fight for that loan. We say, I'm fighting for 5 billion loan. We have a smaller banks which does not have much capital. Then I have a very big bank which has enough capital. So both of them are trying for the same loan, 5 billion. If we don't talk about capital, anyone can fight it and whoever gets can get it. If something goes wrong, that smaller bank will wipe out. Bigger bank may have an issue but can survive. So what capital adequacy said, if you are fighting for this facility, you need to have minimum amount of capital in order to acquire that loan, right? Minimum capital adequacy. Capital divided by asset should be equal to some amount, where Basel started it as 8%. Right now it is 12.5%. So it started like that, right? So Basel 1 spoke only about credit risk. Basel was hailed from incorporating risk into the calculation of capital requirement. So that is the first time we started thinking of risk and capital. So this is the minimum capital adequacy ratio, which was named after Peter Cook, who was the governor of Bank of England, which is the Reserve Bank for England. Cook ratio is capital divided by risk-weighted asset. Capital is core capital plus supplementary capital minus deductions, right? Before going there, when you talk about assets, we have two things. We have direct assets and indirect assets. Direct assets or direct facilities are term loans.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, we can't see the presentation, sir.
Hold on. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what we were discussing, very sorry about it. Yeah. So we started 1988, Basel 1. Then this is a snapshot on Basel 1. The purpose was to prevent international banks from building business volume without adequate capital, focus on only on credit risk, minimum capital standard introduced, right? Then this is the Cook ratio, which I already told you. It is the minimum capital adequacy ratio. Capital is core capital plus supplementary capital minus deduction. I was just talking to you about assets. Okay, you are clear? Do you have any questions up to now? Yes, no, please.
So on the deductions, we deduct goodwill plus, what is the other
Goodwill
one?
minus investment in unconsolidated banking and finance subsidiaries and investment in the share capital of banks and finance companies. Right?
Okay, sir.
Right. So when you talk about assets, we have two types of assets, direct assets and indirect assets. Direct assets are, which I have told you earlier as well, direct and indirect facilities. Direct facilities are facilities where money goes out of the bank as soon as granted. It can be credit card, PODs, TODs, term loans, pledge loans, whatever. Right? Indirect or contingent facilities are facilities where we take only a responsibility, right? Like bank guarantees, LCs, right? All those things are indirect facilities. When you talk about asset here, it is direct and indirect facilities both, right? Direct and indirect. So when you take direct facilities, you take the facilities as it is. If it is 100 million, you take as 100 million. But if you are taking an indirect asset, you don't take, like we say, we have a term loan of 100 million and a bank guarantee of 100 million. Term loan, we take as it is 100 million. For bank guarantee, you take a percentage of it. So indirect facilities need to be multiplied by a factor which is called credit conversion factor, to convert into a direct facility. So indirect facilities need to be converted to direct facilities. For that, we multiply the indirect facility with a factor called credit conversion factor. It is 100, 50 and 20. We have three factors, 100, 50 and 20. I have send you a handout. This shows you example. See this one. Any bank guarantee performance bond, bid bonds, those things are 50%. Standby letter of credit or bank guarantee goes as 100%. Self-liquidating facility, that is the LC line, goes as 20%. Trading LC line goes as 20%. These are the three factors. 100% for bank guarantees or standby letter of credit, which is given as a security. Bank guarantee in the sense credit purchase bank guarantees, which are 100%. If it is a performance guarantee, advance payment guarantee, maintenance guarantee, all those things are 50%. Then, if it is a trading letter of credit, it is 20%. Right? So, asset equals direct asset plus indirect asset into credit conversion factor. This is 100%, 50%, or 20%. So based on the type of the indirect asset, you need to decide the factor, right? So combination of that goes as the asset. Right. Then we go to Basel 1. What Basel 1 told, right? If you are lending to different people, you have to have a risk weight, right? Basel 1 gave 4 different risk weights. When you are lending, you have to use, right? They told the only risk associated with lending is credit risk, right? So when you are lending based on the borrower, you have to classify different risk rates, right? So it is minimum capital adequacy, which is equal to capital divided by risk weighted asset. Basel 1 told it should be more than 8%. This is the secret. So it is capital equal tier 1 capital plus tier 2 capital plus tier 3 recently added up minus goodwill minus investment in subsidiaries and those. Then you have risk weight, risk into direct asset plus credit conversion factor into indirect asset, right? Basel 1 told there are 4 types: 0, 20%, 50%, and 100%. These are the risk rates. If you are lending against cash, gold, OECD government, or US Treasury, it is 0 risk, right? Right? 0 risk means you don't need capital. You can borrow and lend. See, for this you multiply this one. This is becoming 0. So you just don't need capital. Right? 20% risk. If you are lending against banks in OECD government, it is 20%. Bank in OECD countries, it is 20%. US Treasury or municipalities, it is 20%. So that means this risk factor is 20% here. I get an example. Capital for we say it is 10% here for easiness. You need to lend 100 rupees, 20% into 100. So capital divided by 20% into 100, which is capital, divided by 20% of 100 is 10% is 10 rupees, 20% is 20 into 10%. So it is equals to 2 rupees. Right? From here you need 2 rupees. From here you can borrow 98 rupees. Am I correct? Yeah. Right? So this is the equation. So you have capital, you have risk weight into asset. Right? Asset is 100. If we take 20% risk weight, 100 into 20 is 20 rupees. 10% multiplied by this, 10% of 20 rupees is 2. So in order to lend for risk category 20% company, you need 2 rupees of your own funds and 98 rupees you can borrow and lend. Then the third one, if you are lending against residential mortgages, this equation would be capital divided by 50% into 100 equal to 10%. Right? That means 50% of 100 is 50. Capital divided by 50 equal 10, that is 5 rupees. Right? So it is 5 rupees, 95 rupees you can borrow and lend. Right? Third category, fourth category is 100%. 100% means you need full amount here. And all 10 rupees is from your funds. Capital divided by 1 into 100 equals 10%. So capital should be 10 rupees. So it is 10 rupees. You can borrow only 90 rupees. You can see the board. So we have this one, capital divided by risk weight into the asset. Right? First is 0. When you set 0, this is going to be 0. So this is going to be infinite. So what happened is you don't need to borrow. You need to have your own funds. You can borrow and lend when it is 0 capital. Right? What are the things we have? This is the 4 types you have. 0, cash and gold held in the banks. We are lending against cash and gold. O, OECD governments and US Treasury. Then it is 0. If you are lending for US government agencies, claim on municipalities, OECD banks, it is 20. Residential mortgages, it is 50. Any other thing, it is 100. Whether it is Haley's or a small micro grocery, it is the same. This is the issue with Basel I. Basel I introduced the risk weights. However, they had only 4 risk categories: gold, cash, US government treasuries. Second one, it is US government agencies, OECD banks, and municipalities of US. Then it is 20%, 50% for any residential mortgages, 100% for all other. whether it is a top corporate or a small micro company, all are the same. So this creates an issue. And Basel I had two issues, mainly this one, risk one. Then they were considering only on credit risk, nothing else. This is a calculation which I did almost the same. Then they came up with Basel II, Basel I and Basel II. Basel I focused on single risk, which is the credit risk. Then one size fits all. That means corporates and micro all are the same. Because of that, we came into a position called regulatory capital arbitrage. Regulatory capital arbitrage. That means with the same capital, two banks can act differently, right? If I am lending to good corporates, my margins would be thinner. Risk return trade-off. So I have one X amount of capital. Another bank, they also have X amount of capital. My credit culture is value driven. So I'm lending only to corporate customers. So my margins are thinner, my profits are lower. Other banks, they are having a profit driven culture where they go for high risk categories. Their profits are higher. So we are talking about 1988 till 1994, that era, right? So what happened when with the same capital, because any company goes as a 100% capital requirement under Basel I. So if I am lending to a corporate or I am lending to a micro, capital requirement is the same because it is 100% weight. So the second bank is earning much more higher profit than the first bank. So investors goes and invest on that, which is high risk bank, right? That is called one size fits all or regulatory capital arbitrage. With the same capital, you can act differently. Basel I, from 1988 to 1994, in between, they introduced market risk, but they didn't bother about the operation risk, right? Normally, we say Basel I considered only credit risk, because in the latter part only they introduced the market risk. Whereas the Basel II, which came as a three-pillar model, and they were concentrating mainly on internal processes. Then they talk about regulatory capital and they talk about discipline, which we are going to see shortly now. Then they gave, in Basel I, they had only one method of doing it, is 4 types of risk weight, whereas Basel II, it was flexible. Each category of risk, they have different methods based on your risk appetite and risk methodologies used in the risk management tools they use in the bank. You can decide which tool to be used, which menu to be used, and it introduced operation risk as well. Basel I is only single risk, capital arbitrage. They didn't bother about operation risk. Basel II, it started as 3-pillar method. It recognized the internal risk management processes. It introduced the operation risk as well. This is Basel I. Basel II. How do I do it? Look at the board. Basel II, which is called a three-pillar mechanism, right? Pillar 1, Pillar 2, Pillar 3, right? I start from this pillar. This is the market pillar or discipline pillar, right? See, now if you compare annual report 10-15 years ago and today, earlier it was 2 to 3 pages, not more than 10 pages. Today it is a big bulky book. You have to declare from top management remuneration to everything, right? What pillar 3 said, you have to be transparent. You have to declare everything. Then the investors will evaluate you through your transparent declaration. Then they will decide whether you are good or bad. Accordingly, they will invest on your company or not. So, market will discipline you. So, you have to be transparent. You have to declare everything. You have to have a management discussion. You have to have your risk profile, portfolio analysis, everything. So, market will decide whether your company is good or bad. That is market pillar or disciplinary pillar, right? That is pillar 3. Then we'll come to pillar 1. Under this, they talked about 3 things: credit risk, market risk, and operational risk. Based on your portfolio and based on your operation, you need to allocate your capital for these 3 risks. Pillar 1 talks about credit risk, market risk, and operation risk. 3, right? Based on your portfolio, based on your facilities, as per your best knowledge, you need to allocate risk for minimum capital adequacy, which is capital divided by risk weighted asset. Based on this asset, you have to allocate for these things, right? Right? Credit risk plus market risk plus operational risk. Okay. So each of these, they gave 3 methods. Each of these risk categories, how to calculate the capital requirement, they gave 3 methods. Our syllabus covers risk, credit risk. In your handout, you have these 2 as well. So you just can go through to have an idea. You are my 12th group. They have never, I used to teach these 2 as well. but they have never asked about these two because it's out of your syllabus, right? So I'm not talking to you about these two. I'll be specifically discussing this one. These two you can look at it if you like, right? Then credit risk. You have standard method, three methods, standard method, IRB, internal rating based, basic method or foundation method, IRB, advanced method. These are the three methods we use under credit risk. Standard method, IRB, basic or foundation, IRB, advanced method. This is internal rating based, right? We discussed about risk ratings earlier, right? So I will go into these things later. So this is pillar 1. Then came to pillar 2, right? Pillar 1 discuss only about these three risks. There are other large number of risks which we have not considered under pillar 1. So what they said, this is called regulatory review process, internal capital adequacy assessment process. But they said there are other risks which does not cover under P1, pillar 1. So based on your risk in the business, risk in your company, regulator should tell us how much we should allocate for other risks which are not these three. For that, you need to have a process called internal capital adequacy assessment process. We call it ICAP, right? Internal capital adequacy assessment process, which is called ICAP. That is to give me little time. I'm recovering from vaccination. Today only I came to work. Right? So P2, it is the regulatory capital part, regulators part. It covers all the risks which are not covered under these three. It can be legal risk, it can be reputation risk, it can be other risks under this which is not covered here, anything. So bank knows how risky you are, bank internal, right? So you decide what is the additional capital you need to allocate. That process is called internal capital adequacy assessment process, right? So this is the three pillars. Let us go to the presentation, then we'll come back again. Right? These are the three pillars. Pillar 1, minimum capital requirement for credit risk, market risk, and operation risk. Pillar 2, supervisor review of an institution's capital adequacy and internal assessment process. Effective use of market discipline. Pillar 3. This is the pillar 1. Pillar 1 is trying to achieve if the bank's own internal calculation shows that they have risky, loss-prone loans that generate high internal capital charges, their formal risk-based capital charge should be higher. That means lower risk loans, lower capital, higher risk loan, higher capital. This is the operational. This is the pillar 2, right? Supervisor review process. Banks are advised to develop internal capital adequacy assessment process and set targets for capital to commensurate with banks' risk profile. That means whatever the risk not captured under pillar 1, you have to capture under pillar 2. This element would provide a clear articulation of the bank's risk appetite by risk category and the quantification of any risk not included in pillar 1. So under ICAP, bank has to decide whether my business is riskier, am I facing any risk? Based on that, we have to allocate capital. There is a process for that. That process is called internal capital. What happens is, under Basel 1, supervisor tells you this is the capital you require. But under Basel 2, all capital requirements are calculated by the bank ourselves. And supervisor is only checking the integrity of that calculation. So it is a different approach, which is a different leap from earlier supervisor telling you that this is what you need, and now we calculate and they just check, right? Pillar 1 is credit risk, market risk, and operation risk only. Pillar 2, all other risk except for the earlier 3. So how to calculate pillar 2? It is internal capital adequacy assessment process, ICAP. Supervisor has to approve that. Third pillar is the market pillar. You have to declare everything. Market will decide whether you are good or bad. Right? Those are the 3 pillars. Let us go back to pillar 1 again. This is pillar 1. Standard model, internal rating based, IRB, basic, or advanced model, right? Standard model it is almost similar to Basel 1. Almost similar to Basel 1. Right? What is the similarity? Basel had 4 risk categories: 0, 20, 50, and 100. All businesses came under this. That is the issue. Under standard model, what happened? They allowed these businesses to be rated by external rating agencies like Fitch, Moody, anyone. If your customer rate themselves by an external rating agency, based on the rate, you will have different risk weights. If it is a AAA company, it is 20%. AA plus to I think it is triple B, it is 50%. Right? If it is default, it is 150%. If you are not rated, unrated, it is 100%. That means unrated does not mean it is a default company. That's why it is 100%. So based on the external rating they receive, Basel allocated rates, risk weights. Earlier it was only one size. Anything micro to corporate, it is 100%. Now, Basel allowed our customers to be rated by external rating agency. Based on the rating agency rate, they gave rates. You have another handout, Basel additional information. There you can see the rates. Right? Just go through it. 20, 50, 150 and 100 different rates are there. Just go through that. Right? Standard model allows the corporates or the business people to rate themselves, or the whoever was under here could be taken external rating. Based on the external rating, banks were allowed to take different risk weights. On top of these, they were allowed to segregate the people in this one, also using an external rating agency. So that is the difference between Basel 1 and Basel 2 standard model. Basel 1, they gave specific 4 risk weights, 0, 20, 50 and 100. All the businesses and other entities which does not fall into US Treasury, OECD government, US municipalities, US government agencies fall into 100% category. Based on Basel 2 standard model, this 100% category people were allowed to take external rating, risk rating, using external rating agency. Based on the rate, they give different weights. Right? Banks would use different weights based on the external rating they got. That is standard model. That is the standard model. Okay? If you are good in your risk management, here under Basel 1, they didn't bother about the bank's risk management. Right? But Basel 2 came into IRB, internal rating based model. It is PD into LGD into exposure at default. IRB calculation is this. Right? Your handouts gives you this one. Expected loss equals PD into LGD into EAD. Right? So expected loss equals PD minus loss given probability of default, loss given default, LGD equal into exposure at default, probability of default, loss given default, exposure at default. Probability of default is taken from the internal risk rating. What is the risk rating? It is the probability a customer may go into bad. That is the credit worthiness. Triple B has 0.2% probability based on a historical thing. Probability of default is taken from the internal risk rating of a bank. All bank portfolios need to be risk rated. Right? Then loss given default. It is equal to 1 minus recovery rate. Right? It is based on the product you have given. Right? It is the product you have given based on the 5-year moving average. If a OD goes bad, what is the recoveries you have made? Right? This is also a percentage. Right? But recovery rate, we say based on the 5-year average, if a 1 million goes bad, we recover only 600,000 on average basis. So this is equal to 1 minus 0.6, which is equal to 0.4. So this is equal to 40%. Right? 0.4. So loss given default is 1 minus recovery rate. Again, it is based on the 5-year moving average. Based on 5-year your data, you have to calculate this one. Expected exposure at default. That is, what was the exposure at the time of default? All direct and indirect both. Right? If a bank guarantee is given, you have to consider that also as a exposure. Right? But it's the exposure at the time of default. These are the 3 parameters we use under IRB. Right? IRB basic means bank allowed to take our own figures for this one. All other things, we need to get the supervisor's approval. That means we have to calculate and show to the central bank, get their approval in order to use the figures. These figures we can take as it is from our own books. When we go to IRB advanced, supervisor will check all our books, our methodologies, and we will be allowed to take our own figures without getting their approval for all these figures. IRB advanced. The difference between basic and advanced is basic, banks are allowed to take our figures only for this. They need to get approval for these two. Whereas IRB advanced, they approve the formula process, then we are allowed to take our own figures without getting approval from the central bank for this. Right? So if I am to summarize, Basel 1, we had 4 risk categories: 0, 20, 50, and 100. All the businesses and OECD government excluded ones are here. So Basel had the issue. They were talking only about credit risk, and because they put everyone here, it paved the way for arbitrage, regulatory capital arbitrage. That means with the same capital, 2 banks can operate differently. Right? Therefore, Basel II came in. Basel II, which is a three-pillar mechanism. Pillar 3, which is the market. Pillar 1, which looks after three things: credit, market, and operation risk. Pillar 2 looks after all other risks excluding these three. We have a process called ICAP. All these three risks will have three different methodologies to calculate risk. Based on your risk management capabilities, you can decide which central bank will allow you to use whatever the possible. So first one is standard model, which is almost similar to Basel I, but the difference is under the standard model, whoever in the 100% category was allowed to take external ratings, independent external ratings. Based on the external ratings, they gave different weights. So we could give different weights based on external rating. If your customer is willing to take external rating, you can allocate different weights, right? Then we went on to second one, which is IRB, internal rating base. It is calculated using probability of default, loss given default, and exposure at default. That is the formula to calculate capital there. Then, under basic guideline, banks are allowed to use probability of default, which is the risk rating based weights. For probability of default, these two, they need to get approval from the central bank. When you go to advanced method, central bank evaluate and approve your process, you can use your own figures, right? That is the difference between basic and advanced. So the problem here is, like larger banks will have very good sophisticated methods to calculate these things. Smaller banks will not have that. Therefore, long-term competition between these banks is a questionable thing, right? Better your risk management processes, lower would be your capital requirement, because they recognize your risk management processes, right? That is Basel II. Then we go to Basel III. The difference between Basel II and Basel III is this is the risk weights I spoke to you about. Corporate 20, 50, 100, 100, and 150, 100. This one. This is the difference between Basel II and Basel III. Basel III started talking about the core capital, quality of the tier 1 capital. They want to increase the share capital and revenue reserve, P&L reserve part largely, which is called core tier 1. Core tier 1. That is common share and the P&L reserves. So Basel II introduced two ratios, which is called capital conservation buffer and counter-cyclical buffer, right? when you are calculating your capital adequacy requirement, you have to allocate capital for these two as well. First one, capital conservation buffer you have to allocate, right? Whenever you are in stress, you can use that on loans. But if you are using the capital conservation buffer, you can't declare dividends. That means you are using your set aside buffer, and other hand, you can't give money to your shareholders. Banks allow to draw on this buffer during period of stress, but will then be subject to constraints on earning distribution. If you are using capital conservation buffer for capital adequacy, you are not allowed to use the payout dividends. Then the second one is not always there. Central bank can always come and say you have to activate counter-cyclical buffer. That means you have to allocate more capital when you are calculating the capital adequacy. This is used to stop the credit lending. අපි එකපාරටම අපේ capital adequacy එක වැඩි කරනවා. මෙතන time to time based on government requirement, central bank requirement. Is 0 to 2.5%, they can come and say, okay, you activate your counter-cyclical buffer. In that scenario, if it is 10%, you have to increase it to 12.5. That is to control the credit. That is to stop the building up of risk, right? So Basel III introduced these two ratios. That is the main difference between Basel II and Basel III. Basel III started discussing mainly on the quality of capital, right? Okay, that comes to the end of Basel. Do you have any question on Basel? Any questions? Basel introduced capital adequacy ratio, which is capital divided by risk-weighted asset, right? Risk weights started with Basel I. There are 4 risk weights: 0, 20, 50, and 100. Except for US government and the OECD countries. OECD means Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. 32 countries are there. 35 countries are there. Except for them, any other thing, even Sri Lankan government or corporate or micro, everyone were in 100% category, right? Then they were considering only credit risk. Because of that, Basel II came into picture. Basel II introduced 3-pillar method. Firstly, they considered about credit risk, market risk, and operation risk, 3 together. Then all other risks came under pillar 2, which is ICAP process, internal capital adequacy assessment process. Thirdly, it is the market discipline. That means you have to declare everything. Market will decide whether you are good or bad. On pillar 1, you have credit risk, market risk, and operation risk. Each risk, there were 3 methods of calculating capital. We are looking at only credit risk here, which is standard model, internal rating based basic model, and internal rating based advanced model. Under standard model, what happens? The difference between Basel I and Basel II, Basel I and Basel II standard model is Basel I, you had 100% category. whoever under the 100% category was allowed to take external rating. If you have an external rating, based on the external rating, risk weights were given. Right? That is the difference between Basel I and Basel II standard model. Then came to Basel II IRB model. Expected loss is calculated as PD, probability of default, into loss given default into exposure at default. Exposure at default is what is the exposure at the time of default. Loss given default is based on the 5-year moving average, based on your own data. If a facility, based on the facility type, if a facility goes bad, what is the expected recovery? 1 minus recovery rate is loss given default. Probability of default is your risk rate. What is the probability a customer may go into arrears? That is the credit worthiness. That is probability of default. So under basic, you are allowed to take your own figures for PD, exposure at default and loss given default. You have to get the approval from central bank. Advanced, IRB advanced, central bank clears the process and the formula. After that, you can take your own details. That is IRB advanced, right? So that is summarized entire Basel. The problems we may see is larger sophisticated banks operate in a different platform, where the smaller banks operate in a different platform. So larger banks with their sophistication, they can bring down their capital requirement, whereas smaller banks does not have that luxury. Basel II recognize the internal risk management processes. That's why different methodologies are given. Then Basel III mainly focus on the quality of tier 1, that is core tier 1. Then they introduce 2 buffers, countercyclic buffer and capital conservation buffer, right? Capital conservation buffer you need to allocate, and only in a stress situation you can use. Countercyclic buffer, central bank activates whenever there is a large credit growth in the market, right? That is the difference between Basel II and Basel III. That ends to Basel lecture. Any questions? Yeah, central bank use Basel III to control credit. If our credit to private sector is increasing, they can come and activate the countercyclic buffer. Okay, Malaka? Malaka? Okay, Basel III basically under Basel III, they are talking about the core capital, right? They're bothered about the tier 1 capital. So that is to get the share capital, common share and P&L reserves maybe, right? They introduce these 2 ratios. which is capital conservation buffer and countercyclic buffer, right? Capital conservation buffer, you have to allocate your capital with other things. Whenever bank is in a position where we don't have enough capital, you can use this buffer which you have already allocated. But when you are using this buffer, you can't pay out dividends because you are interest, you have come to the final stages of your capital adequacy, you can't grow your book. In that scenario, you should not allow your owners to get profits as well, right? So capital conservation buffer, if activated, you are not allowed to pay dividends. Then the second one is countercyclic buffer. It's not always active. Central bank can time to time start activating that. When it is activated, whenever you are calculating your capital adequacy, you have to use this one as well. If it is capital adequacy is 10%, and if the central bank say you have to allocate 1% for counter-cyclic buffer, then your capital adequacy is 11%, not 10%. Because now central bank has allocated capital adequacy. Why they have activated the counter-cyclic buffer is to limit the lending, right? How? You need to have your own capital to lend. That is the theory. When activating counter-cyclic buffer means you are increasing the capital requirement to lend. Earlier, we needed only 5 rupees to lend 100 rupees. Now, you need 6 rupees to lend 100 rupees. That means your lending will come down. This will be used only when there is a larger credit growth in the market. That is the difference between Basel III and Basel II. Basel III, they introduced these two new ratios. Okay. Is it clear, Melvis? Right. Now we will go to the last lecture. Credit administration. This is the credit process. Can you remember I drew on our first day credit process and credit policy diagram, which is an umbrella type thing. So this is the credit process. We initiate, evaluate, negotiate, approve, right? Then you have to do the documentation signing. Then you close the credit. Then it is the monitoring part where you have covenant monitoring, payment monitoring, stock maintenance, insurance maintenance, all those things, portfolio management part. If everything goes good, it will pay and repay and finish it off. If you have problems, early warning signals or bad credit, you have to reevaluate the business, that is the remedial management, and approve it and come on the same path. If you can't make the business better, you have to go on legal action and recovery and finish it off. So this is the entire credit process. managing this credit process is called credit administration. Like under BCBS, they say no single transaction should be completed by people who are reporting to a single head. No single transaction should be completed by people who are reporting to a single head. Why? If all are reporting to a single head, if a bogus loan comes in, all my people just let it go, right? What happened here is business line who canvas the business, evaluate and approve has to report to the business head. Then you have another line which is the risk line who will independently evaluate, but they will not be reporting to the business head, they will report to the risk head. So you have a defense line, you have the first defense line, you, the credit people, then second defense line here under this scenario, it is the risk people. Then you have third person, okay, you approve, risk also evaluate and give their comments. Then there will be a third set of people who will go through the reports and do the system adjustments. Whoever does the approval and marketing, those guys should not be allowed to do the system changes. You do a system, you do approval, give it to the credit administration. They will prepare the offer letters. They will do the system issues. All those things will be done by a third party. So if something is wrong, there are other people who will find it out. If it is the same business line, they will try to pull it under the carpet and proceed. So no single transaction should be completed by people who are reporting to single head. That is the condition. So business unit, risk management unit, and credit admin unit. Credit admin reports to the operations head, right? This is the view of the CBSL. So CBSL says we should have a process or system for ongoing administration of various credit risk bearing portfolios. We have to have, because our portfolio bears different credit risks, AAA, AA, single A, B, B minus, like that different. So we should have processes and procedures to manage each credit risk. AAA, annually we will visit. AA, biannually we may visit and put a report. AA, quarterly basis. Stock statements, all the conditions. So it is an ongoing administration. Principle here is maintaining an appropriate credit administration, measurement, and monitoring process. You need to have proper credit administration in order to measure the risk and monitor the progress of our portfolio. Right? That is the regulator's view. When you are creating a credit administration function, you have to give due consideration for 4 things. When you are creating a credit administration function, these 4 things should be kept in mind. Firstly, efficiency and effectiveness of the credit administration. It has to be very efficient. Monitor, document preparation, contractual agreements, all things are efficient and effective. Accuracy should be there. Otherwise, we give a appraisal report, you prepare offer letter, which is wrong. Then when we want to find out some information, you don't have it, then it's wrong. So your credit administration process need to be efficient and effective. Then Accuracy and timeliness of information provided. When I want to find out what is my exposure to Russia, credit administration function should be able to give it within few hours or few seconds. If it takes a month or two to find out that, we are in trouble. So accuracy and timeliness of providing information is a key function of credit admin. Segregation of duties. Under the credit administration, different people should do different functions. Same single person should not do the same lot of functions. There has to be different people doing different functions. Segregation of duties. Same way, control over the back office function. The inputter should not be an authorizer. Both passwords should not be with one person. Like that, back office function and procedures should be controlled properly. Then credit admin should be very much thorough with compliance with the risk management policies and rules and regulations of the state. 4 items. Firstly, efficiency and effectiveness of administration, accuracy and timeline of MIS providing, segregation of duties, control over the back office procedures, and compliance with prescribed risk management policies and laws and regulations of the country. So these are the 4 factors to be in line when you are designing the credit administration. These are the list of functions credit administration unit will do. The theory behind this is the business unit, business line should not be allowed to mingle with the system. Business line will canvass, evaluate, and approve. After that, all things should be done by the third party, which is the credit admin. Establishing and granting limits. System disbursement, limit setup, all things should be done by them. Like you do appraisal report, credit admin is the one who needs to do the offer letter and give it to the business line. Once you receive the offer letter, you have to get it signed from the customer with all supporting documents and return it back to credit admin. Then they will place the limits as per the offer letter. Offer letter should match the approval. Then offer letter should be placed in the system. All short-term disbursement will happen through them. All long-term staggered disbursement will happen through them. All documentary checking will happen through them. So it is independent of the business line who is facing the customer. Maintenance of insurance diaries. Because insurance is what? We have 4 methods: accept risk, avoid, reduce, and transfer. Risk transfer mechanism is insurance. If you have not maintained the proper insurance diary, is as good as nothing. So third party is responsible to maintain the insurance diary. That is CA. Collateral valuation and up to date. That means collateral valuations. Every 3 years, 5 years, you need to have collateral. That has to be maintained by CA. If it is very sophisticated, we know what are the collateral we have, who are the valuers, whether the same valuer is giving us valuation. All those things should be monitored. Those are MIS, which is needed for risk management. So collateral valuation up to date, immovable property, shares, stocks, everything has to be maintained by them. Periodic change, we give AWPLR plus rates. So change of this AWPLR done by CAU. Pledge operation. What is a pledge operation? The ownership is the borrower, but possession with the bank. If you maintain the stocks under dual control, customer and the bank. So who maintains? It is the CAU, not the business line, because business line is dealing with the customer. So in order to avoid any unwanted intervention, we have given everything to the third party, which does not have a direct link to the customer. Ensure compliance and monitoring of covenants. We have two types of covenants. Can you remember the two types? Positive and negative, affirmative or restrictive. You can put covenants, but you have to monitor. CAU is the one who is monitoring and telling you this covenants breached. You need to get it corrected. Then management reporting, telling the management how many new loans, what is the sector exposures, product exposures, all those things given by CAU. Recovery of charges and fees. Whenever you have charges and fees, its system recovery will happen through CAU. So this is a list, but it is not exhaustive. There can be much more things. The theory is business line should not be tackling with the systems. They have to finish their function by approval. All other things and maintenance is the third party function. Right? Function of CAU, establishing and granting limits, release loan proceed, effective stage-wise, long-term disbursement time to time with supporting documents. Disbursement has to happen by the third party. Make accurate structure of the credit in the system. That means offer letter and the system has to be the same. Granting revolving credit, custodian preparation, execution. Only the land registration and those kind of things handled by legal department. All other things need to be done by the CAU independently. This is the guidelines of Basel, right? But based on our resources, we may do little differently. I know some banks, still everything happen at the branches, but that is not the way Basel wanted. Maintenance of insurance diaries, maintenance of collateral, immovable property valuation, update share prices, currency fluctuation, stock inspections, all those things. Periodic changing interest rate, AWPLR, adjustment in the margin, AWPLR +3, +2, that one. Penal interest rate adjustments. Compliance and monitoring of covenants is better to have covenants. It is no use if you are not monitoring. Regulatory review, new loans granted, concentration data, provide credit portfolio data, capital calculation, EAD, that one, right? So all other things you can go through if you have time or free time, but this is CAU is the third party who handles the operational activities of the credit. So theory behind it is no single, it should not be, theory is no single transaction should be completed by people who are reporting to a single head. So business line who is responsible for canvassing, evaluation and approval should report to business head. Then you have risk line who will independently evaluate and give their guidelines, that is risk head. Then you have credit admin, which looks after the after evaluate approval. All other functions should report to operational head. So if something goes wrong, there are two defense lines. before hitting the bank, right? So CAU, when you are establishing a credit admin function, you need to look at four things: efficiency and accuracy. You need to know efficiency and accuracy, timeliness and accuracy of efficiency and effectiveness, timeliness and accuracy, then segregation of duties, control over the back office function, and compliance to all the regulations. That is the backbone of creating a credit admin function. So credit administration function will look after all system related things and monitoring related things. So I gave you a list, so just go through it, because time they have asked questions from what are the theories behind setting up the CAU, functions of CAU, like that. They have asked questions from this slide, right? So go through it. That comes to the end of my lecture. Any questions from CAU function? You have to look at all the regulations. I will try to share the latest, at least this year's regulation. They ask about LTV. They may ask you this time about the foreign currency exchange rate regulations, because very frequent changes are happening in exchange rate. So I will summarize some of the regulations which came within last 4-5 months and give it to you, right? They may ask regulations. They used to ask, but they stopped. But last time also they have asked a small regulation. So I will summarize and give you next time, right? So check with, I will, Institute will let you know. Most probably next week we will have classes. Before login, you just check with the Institute whether we have classes. But end of this month we have to stop classes. I have covered the entire syllabus, but I will take 1 or 2 days maximum to do a paper. Anyway, if you come to my revision class, I will be doing papers there as well, right? Any questions which I can answer you now?
Sir, when is the exam?
I'm not sure, because they asked us to stop lectures by end of this month or early next month, but they didn't tell me when the exam is. You will have at least a month or so before the exam. Right? If you give a call, I don't think even they know the school. You should ask Kavindo, Menaka, they will tell you. Any other questions? If no questions, I'll stop for the day. Let's meet most probably next week or after this. Please check with the Institute when you have the next class. There I will try to give you some regulations, because my guess is they will ask, I don't know, they will ask about exchange control regulation this time, because that is the most frequently changed regulation at this moment of time, right? Okay, thank you then.